So what's the stake when it comes to these elections? For more on that, we are joined by Abdullahi Boru Halakhe. He is an African security policy analyst and an expert on governance, peace, and security in Africa. Abdul, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
We were just chatting a moment ago during that story that Madagascar is no different than any other area. Everybody wants to see a dramatic change in leadership because what hasn't been working, why do you expect it to work again? But we're seeing the same candidates recycled.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem with most of, low-income countries. The trouble is you end up recycling the same leaders. And it's not a problem that is limited to Madagascar, although Madagascar seems to be, it takes a special place because you're having 3 former presidents running and you have 4 former prime ministers running. So that's a record even for, places like Africa.
Yeah, and also at least one president is claiming fraud, even though we heard the EU so far has found no wrongdoing. Does that give you hope that this election is going to move things in a positive way?
It should. I mean, in an ideal circumstances. But like you said at the top, you're looking at a country where over 90% of the population are living below the poverty line of $2 a day. You're looking at a country where 14%, it's only 14% that is covered by electricity. You're looking at a country where, among the very few countries where, the nominal GDP is lower than when it got its independence in the 1960s. You're looking at a country where it scores 145 out of 176 in, Transparency International standing of, most corrupt countries. So that is the economic side of it. Politically, it doesn't look any better either. 1972, 1991, 2009, 2006, 2003, the list goes on and on and on, where either, the elected government is replaced or the military gets involved. So you're looking at a country that has an enormous potential, like you said, but at the same time it's pulled back by, poor governance, it's pulled back by, a country where political elite is, venal, vicious, and it's over 90% of the country's revenue is spent only in Antananarivo, which is the capital city.
Right. And it's unfortunate that something this important doesn't get more international coverage, but we're talking about 36 people running. Some of them are bitter rivals, yes. And you paint somewhat of a bleak picture. Is there a reason to be positive as we look forward? Every
time elections are held, a lot of the time my explanation has always been, yes, elections have to be, held, but what you see in most of these countries is all the hopes, fears, and dreams are distilled into an election. That's why elections become incredibly competitive, and then it becomes a trigger of, an already underlying structural problems. Elections in and of themselves are not violent. It's just that people bring with it becomes a vessel. There is room for optimism if the political stability holds. In the near future, you might see, the country moving forward because all of us love vanilla, but, that is the capital city of vanilla. So unless the political governance is not sorted out, I think it's going to be a challenge. And the very fine story that ran before our interview talked about some of the major issues: poverty. Yes. So many people live below the poverty line, and corruption. Yes. How
do you get past those hurdles?
There are no easy answers, and some of these answers primarily lies with the Malagasy. As if the population decides whether it's poverty or not, or they decide to vote along, whichever sectarian line they would want to vote, they'll be having the same kind of politicians. All these presidents, what did they do to deserve another mandate?
And that's a good question because entities, civil society groups have really accused former leaders of lining their pockets, of pocketing the money, not helping those who need it the most. You got 36 people running for the president of Madagascar.
Right.
Looking forward,
right.
How is this going to play out?
I mean, what will happen is, at least as far as the legal policy framework is concerned, this election has to be declared 28th of November.
Right.
If none of the presidential candidates are able to get, the 50%, 50 plus 1, where you're looking at, a rerun of the top candidate 19th December. But in the broader scheme of of things. I mean, these are incredibly resilient group of people, and they'll be able to hold it together. But the problem is this extractive elite that keeps on recycling, perpetuating the same, cycle.
It's interesting. And how difficult is it going to be for any of these candidates to get an outright victory? And secondly, I'm also interested in, what is the voting percentage? Clearly, people have a lot at stake. Do a lot of people go to the polls?
They do. We're having something like 8 to 10 million, depending on the data that we have, that are eligible to vote. So if those people come out, you'll be looking at a high turnout. The reason, like I said before, people invest a lot of hopes and fears and everything in an election. So people come out to vote. The question is, one, do their vote count?
Exactly. Yeah.
Two, do they vote for the right kind of candidate? Sometimes it's either or. Sometimes it's both. People go and vote and say, this is my candidate X. But a lot of the time, what you will see is, because of the political corruption, a candidate that doesn't deserve gets elected.
Okay, November 28th, that's the next big deadline. We'll
Yes.
keep that in mind, and of course, CGTN will continue to follow it. Abdullahi Boru Halakhe, Security and Policy Analyst on Africa, thanks very much for joining us here today. Appreciate it.